just this past Tuesday, we received word that Sir Roger Moore had passed away at the age of 89, best remembered for his TV role as the Saint and, of course, as James Bond all throughout the 1970s and 80s. I wanted to have someone on the show to help us celebrate the life and career of Roger Moore, and Lee Pfeiffer joins us now. He's an author. He was also a good friend of Roger Moore's, and he's the editor-in-chief of Cinema Retro magazine, which is a magazine I read. I particularly enjoyed a series of in-depth articles about westerns Raquel Welch made.
That's right. And Bandolero, Annie Calder, 100 Rifles. Yes, and they were all very good movies, actually. They've aged rather well. So if you only think of Raquel as in a bikini running around the surf, try these westerns. She's actually very good in them.
Well, it's a fine magazine because it covers areas of cinema that really don't get all that much coverage in other movie magazines, and the James Bond series factors in heavily. And you not only worked with Roger Moore, but you knew him personally.
Yes, Roger was a friend of mine for about 20 years. Wonderful man, and a person that lived up to your expectations if you grew up in the 60s and 70s, and he was one of your screen idols, as he was one of mine. It's always nice that if you get to know these people later on in your life, that they are deserving of all the attention you gave them over the years. And he was just the ultimate British gentleman. We really won't see his kind again. He's a wonderful man, a great raconteur, very, very funny man. I think that always came through on the screen, and what you saw of him on the screen was exactly the way he was in real life. I've never seen him in a bad mood.
Now, how did you develop this friendship? Did it grow out of a professional partnership?
Back in the early 90s, I befriended the late, great James Bond producer, Albert R. Cubby Broccoli. And he had asked me and a friend of mine to write a book about the Bond franchise. And in that book, we interviewed a lot of people, and that was the first time I ever dealt with Moore directly. It was, I believe I interviewed him on the phone. He was in Switzerland. And then over the years, I started to develop a licensing business with James Bond toys and collectibles, things like that in the 90s and early 2000s. And we did some deals with him. He was a goodwill ambassador at that time for UNICEF.
Right.
And just shows you the kind of guy he is. When I told him we had a sizable check for him for some of these business projects we had done with him, he said, "Don't even send it to me. Just send it straight to UNICEF." And I said, "Well, I'll send you an accounting of it." He said, "I take your word for it." That's the kind of man he was.
Right.
And, I spend a lot of time in England because our magazine is actually published in England. And, if he was in town, we'd get together, we'd see each other at various events. And he was always the life of the party, always very witty. I don't think he ever heard a dirty joke he didn't think was worth repeating to everyone. And he had absolutely no snobism about him. It's funny because he always played snobs,
Right.
The Saint and the Persuaders and James Bond, these snooty sort of
Right.
elegant guys. But in real life, he was the picture of elegance and sophistication, but he was very, very down to earth and could relate to people from all walks of life.
Unlike maybe other actors who've played iconic characters, Roger Moore embraced being Bond and had fun with it.
Well, the problem was with Roger. He liked being around people so much that he would sometimes run late for appointments.
Right.
He would always stop and sign things for people or chat with them. And a friend of mine that was his personal assistant and had to get him to all these different engagements. And he'd say the biggest problem was, he would consider it to be impolite to walk away from someone or say, "I'm too busy" or something. So it was always difficult to get him away from. He really appreciated his fans. He truly did. And you're right. I mean, for the Bond producers, Roger took over the role in 1972. He was signed for it, For Live and Let Die.
Right.
It came out the next year. And the producers, Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman, were having a bad time with the series. They hated each other.
Right.
They were having all sorts of business problems between each other. Connery didn't like them. They didn't like Connery. Connery left the series in 1967 after he won it twice, and they said, "Oh, we'll get an unknown. That way we can control this guy. He'll be so grateful." They got George Lazenby for On Her Majesty's Secret Service. It was a great film. He did well in it, but Lazenby quit after one film. So they were really annoyed. They got Connery back for one more, and then he said, "That's it. I'm never doing another one after this." So when they got Roger, they found him to be very amicable, very humorous, very happy to take the role. And after all those years of contentiousness with Connery and then Lazenby fighting over contracts and money and egos and all of that, I think Roger was a real breath of fresh air for them. And he became a very good friend of both men, on a personal basis.
When we heard the news that Sir Roger Moore passed away on Tuesday, of course, social media was all over the story and people were leaving comments about how much they'll miss him and performances they enjoyed. Some of them would write, well, Sean Connery is always Bond to me, but I enjoyed Roger Moore. Some would say, well, Pierce Brosnan is Bond to me. And of course, some were saying, well, Roger Moore was my James Bond.
Right.
It's just interesting to me that people look at the Bond series like they do sports franchises, and they have to announce where they stand in the camp, before they make their comments.
It's true. When you're, especially among men of a certain age, they always get very defensive. I've always found I have a T-shirt that promotes Shemp Howard. It's the best of the Three Stooges.
Right.
If you ever want to start a fight with somebody you walk down the street and that, because the Three Stooges is the other thing that men of a certain age will always fight about. How dare you say Curly wasn't the best one?
Right.
And so, Connery, I think everyone would agree Connery was, the one that resonates most with people because he started. He had the advantage of not being compared to anyone else. He had the very perfect balance between humor and drama. Roger was always very self-deprecating about everything he did, and he always rated himself near the bottom of the Bond barrel. And one time I asked him, what was your best performance? And he thought a minute, and he said, "Oh, none of them." And I said to him later, "Do you really believe that? Do you really believe that?" You never gave a good performance. He said, well, essentially I played the same character and everything. It worked for me in The Saint. You raise one eyebrow, you raise two eyebrows. That was about it. But he said, people like that persona with me, and it worked. I never pushed it. I never tried to do anything overly different. So either if you liked what I did, you liked my Bond. If you didn't like that style, then you probably will never like my Bond. But he was very self-deprecating. He didn't think much of his own talents, but he was very grateful for his success. And in fact, he was a very fine actor. I finally grudgingly got out of him one time, there must be some performance that you liked. And he said, well, it's a film most Americans don't remember. It came out in 1969 or 70 called The Man Who Haunted Himself. It's like a Twilight Zone movie in which he starred with a supernatural theme to it. He said, I thought I was pretty good in that. But that's as close as I ever got of him, from him complimenting himself. I mean, in an age today where rampant egos are out of control, including some of our more prominent political figures,
right.
To know a man who was self-deprecating and modest and dismissive of his own achievements was very refreshing.
His Bond movies recently have gone through a reappraisal. There's always a case when the new Bond actor takes over that they usually trash the last batch of movies. With Daniel Craig, they trash Pierce Brosnan's films, which were enormously successful.
They were successful.
Yeah, Roger Moore's movies, enormously successful. But now with the passage of time, people are going back and they're saying, oh, you know what? The Man with the Golden Gun, that's so much fun, and there's so much going on in that movie. And sadly, with his death, that's going to happen. People are going to look back at these films and maybe watch them in a different way and learn to appreciate them in a different way.
Well, I think, everything always looks better in the rearview mirror. You
Right.
know, when people sit around and talk about the good old days. Well, they really weren't that good as we remember them. But I think, once somebody or some seminal figure has gone, you see it within the rock world, people who didn't buy Elvis records in, 10 years, the minute he
Right.
died, they all ran out and bought, Michael Jackson, they all went out and bought his records.
Yep.
Anytime somebody big dies, you go back and reappreciate their work. I mean, Rogers, in my own opinion, Rogers' tenure as Bond was a mixed bag. He was enormously successful at the box office. Most of the films were quite successful. But Roger, because he didn't take anything very seriously, he didn't always fight for better scripts. So if you gave him a good script, you'd do it. If you gave him a lousy script, he'd do it. So it's really... It really is up to the individual to decide whether they like that sort of over-the-top humor, because Roger just thought the whole thing was stupid in the sense that if Bond is a secret agent, he'd always say, how is it that he walks into any bar in the world and the man says, hey, you're James Bond. I have a martini shaken, not stirred. So, and he tried, after he took over from Connery, he realized that trying to imitate Connery would fall flat. He had to play Bond in his own way, for better or worse. So he actually never ordered a martini shaken, not stirred, because he didn't want to emulate Connery. He smoked cigars. Connery didn't
Right.
on screen. So there were some differences there. And he was, whether you liked it or didn't like it, he was diametrically opposite from Connery. And it worked. I mean, he was enormously successful. There's no way around it. But it's funny, he always told a story that when his son was little, this is right after he had signed for James Bond, his son said to him, Daddy, they just released a James Bond double feature at the cinema. Can you take me to see it? They would always reissue the
Sure,
old
of course.
And Roger said to his son, but don't you understand? Daddy now is James Bond. And the son said, yes, but I'm talking about the real James Bond, Sean Connery. So he said, that was about, as much of the air come out of the balloon as possible.
Let me, before we go, let me give a plug for Cinema Retro. What does it come out, 4 times a year?
Well, we do 3 issues a year and a special issue as well that's dedicated to a series or a theme or one film. And you can read it all if you go to cinemaretro.com every day. You'll get the classic news, movie news, and what's going on with film festivals, and you can subscribe to the magazine from there. And there's a lot about Roger Moore and his passing on there as well. So if you're interested in James Bond, we have a whole section dedicated to Bond on there.
Yeah, I'm waiting for your special edition on From Russia with Love. You did one on Dr. No. I'm
yeah,
waiting
that
for
took a long time. Yes, our next special is about World War II films of the 60s, so you'll have to hang on a bit more there, Dave. Hang in there. We'll get to it.
All right. Thank you so much, Lee. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Dave. Pleasure. Keep up the good work.